All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for those joining from the West Coast. I am Joel Dembe, your moderator and host for the next hour. I'm a middle-aged white male with dark brown hair, hazel eyes. I am currently situated at my desk that's close to my living room. Welcome to the Power of Inclusive Workplaces panel. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land from which I am speaking is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, that is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we are gathered across the country today, I would like to ask that we take this moment to express gratitude for being able to call these lands home. As mentioned, my name is Joel, and I'm a former Paralympian. I competed in wheelchair tennis for many years. Now I'm a senior manager corporate communications at Royal Bank of Canada, and I'm also a proud ambassador of the Rick Hansen Foundation. This week marks National Accessibility Week, a week to celebrate the valuable contributions and leadership of Canadians with disabilities. It is also a time to reflect on how we can become a better, more inclusive, and a more accessible Canada. Employers across the country are experiencing historical labor shortages. And yet, there is a significant untapped employment market that is often overlooked: people with disabilities. In fact, public opinion polling by the Angus Reid Institute last year showed that 40% of people with disabilities say corporations are doing a bad or terrible job when it comes to hiring those with disabilities. And this number increases to 55% for people aged 18 to 34. And according to the Return on Disability Group, while 90% of organizations say they prioritize inclusion, only 4% of those consider disabilities. As we face unprecedented labor shortages and physical workplaces reopening following the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, it is more important than ever that we consider how we ensure our workplaces are accessible for everyone. That is why today we are bringing leaders, advocates, and allies in the disability community to speak about how we can ensure workplaces are barrier-free and inclusive for people living with physical disabilities. I would like to thank the Rick Hansen Foundation for hosting this event. We have an incredible group of people here today. On behalf of the Rick Hansen Foundation, I want to express sincere gratitude to our panelists, Marcia, Yale, Marco Chiaramonte, Maureen, Haan, and Philippe Bernier. Before I pass it over to the panelists, I would like to let you know about a few of our logistics. All attendees have been muted by the host. To turn on captions, please use the closed captioning button, CC, in the menu bar in your Zoom screen. You can also use the subtitle settings to increase the size of your captions or view them in a separate window by using the link which was in the reminder email you received from Zoom this morning. If you can't locate the link and prefer to view the captions in a separate window, send us a message in the Q&A and we will send it to you directly. We also have ASL interpretation. The chat function has been turned off so as not to distract myself or the panelists. I will facilitate a Q&A at the end of the session, but please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. Questions will be posed to the panelists at the end of the presentation, and any we don't get to will be answered and sent via email by the Rick Hansen Foundation following the session. The event is being recorded. A link to the recording along with a recap log will be sent to all registrants via email next week. A couple of notes for the panelists. We have a live captioner with us today. I would like to ask that we do our best to speak clearly, as that helps the captioner as well as the ASL interpreter do their job. In addition, please use the raise hand function when wanting to add into the conversation. The next hour is action-packed, so without further ado, I am pleased to hand it over to Marcia to commence introductions.
Good afternoon, I'm Marcia Yale. I am a white settler of Jewish descent, and my pronouns are she and her. And as far as a visual description, well, my hair is getting too long and it's gone gray. So, oh well. I am the national president of the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians and a longtime advocate. I think it goes with the territory. When you're blind, you have to advocate. If you don't, then things don't happen as quickly, if they happen at all. And I think, Joel, I think that's it for now.
All right, thank you, Marcy. And without further ado, I think we're ready for our first question that I will share with our panelists today. And that question is a pretty broad one, and one that will hopefully kick off this important conversation. And that's, what does an accessible and inclusive workplace mean to you? I am going to point this over to Philippe to start.
Joel, thank you, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Philippe. I'm a middle-aged white man with silver hair. I'm wearing a blue shirt and blue tie, and I'm in an office environment in downtown Toronto. An accessible and inclusive workplace, put simply, in my esteem, is about great decisions and great design. Diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a decision. Belonging is a feeling, and the decisions and actions that we take can contribute to or detract from our personal sense of belonging in a community. Success, in my opinion, for an accessible, inclusive workplace would be that we can each bring our authentic selves to the workplace. We can thrive in our environments with the support of our colleagues and teammates. I work in commercial real estate with Jones Lang LaSalle. I'm on the advisory committee for the foundation. Real estate, if designed well, can be more profitable if we prioritize design to include those with mobility, visual, and hearing impairments. We can generate, Joel, as you mentioned, more economic activity. We can create more employment possibilities for the 500,000 Canadians who are underemployed per the Conference Board of Canada. And even for all of us who are employers, it's important to prioritize, because you can differentiate yourself as an employer of choice. You can expand your access to a phenomenal talent pool and also respond to growing social demands. It's very important that we have accessible and inclusive workplaces.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. And we're going to go to Maureen next. And Maureen, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself before you answer, that would be great.
Sure. So my name is Maureen Haan. I am the president and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. I am coming to you from Montreal today, and I am a middle-aged white woman with long brown hair and red glasses that always get a comment. And I have a blurred background. So thanks very much for the question about inclusivity and in the workplace. And you know, it's extremely important to make sure that what we're talking about is individuals who are included in the workplace all the time. And people with disabilities, we have to understand that it's people with disabilities are workers and their talent comes first. And so in order to make sure that we've got talent on the ground, we have to make sure that we're accommodating, but that we're accommodating not just the individual, but through an accessible workplace. And so I look forward to getting into that a little bit more as we go forward. Thanks, Joel.
All right, next up we have Marco. Could you please introduce yourself before answering the question?
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Marco Chiaramonte, Senior Accessibility Inclusion Specialist at the Vancouver International Airport. I identify myself as a middle-aged white male, hard of hearing, with a very short beard, wearing black brownish glasses. I am wearing a navy color suit jacket with a pink shirt, and my background it's blurred. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And what an accessible, inclusive workplace really means for me is allows opportunities for individuals to function at their full potential. It's about giving people what they need to be successful. There needs to be an improved awareness to create and promote inclusive environment and conditions that are accessible to all. As a hard of hearing person myself, having full communication accessibility is really important. It allows me to connect with the people. It allows me to participate in meeting discussions and perform at my best. So for example, in this panel discussion we're having today, I see we have captioning, we have ASL interpreters. I also use a listening device that connects the computer right to my hearing aid. So that's what an inclusive environment means for me. And I would use that as an example in the workplace everywhere I go. Please note that one method does not fit all. So it's really important to tailor the accommodation to meet the person's needs. Meaning, what worked for me may not work for someone else, and the key is to implement accessible and inclusive practices that creates a culture of positive influence where people can thrive and be successful amongst their peers. And sometimes employers will have to adapt to different situations so that the individual can fully participate given different circumstances that could come up. You have to be adaptable, you have to think outside the box, always ask the individual what their needs are so that it can be more of an inclusive environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last panelist is Marcia. Marcia, you're up.
Thanks, Joel. So for me, an inclusive and accessible workplace means not only is it physically accessible, so it has different floor surfaces so that you can walk around and not run into things. It has ramps, it has elevators, it has decent lighting for contrast, all of that. But if you only have that, then you don't have an accessible and inclusive workplace. You just have an accessible and inclusive building. For the workplace itself to be accessible, I'm with Philippe. You have to feel like you belong there. So you have to, there has to be that attitude that everybody is welcome and that everyone can be productive in however he or she or they is able to, and that all of that productivity is welcome. And like I said, if there isn't the right attitude, then it's just a building, it's not a workplace. And a lot of times that gets forgotten. You build the right building and you figure that's all you have to do. But if there's still bias in how you treat people, if there's still not the right software environment for someone who can't see, or the right software environment for someone who can't hear well, then then it's going to fail. So you have to have everything.
I couldn't echo those words even further. Accessibility isn't just the physical barriers around you. It's going deeper into the software that some of us might need, the sense of feeling included. So Marcia, thank you so much for that wonderful answer. I'm going to start with the next question, and that is, what are some accessibility and inclusive workplace considerations for employers, colleagues, and allies? Now, we touched on it a little bit before, but Marco, I'd love to hear what your answer to this question would be. Marco, are you on mute, I believe?
Apologies. My apologies. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I would consider developing a roadmap to improve accessibility and inclusion by consulting with key community members, organizations, service providers, subject matter expertise, led by people with lived experiences, people with disabilities, and involving that process through an engagement process where enables employers to identify not only the barriers, but also how to make improvements and promote best practices from an accessibility and lens perspective. So for example, at Vancouver Airport, we have an Employment Equity and Diversity Committee to build that awareness and create a culture that encourages and seeks feedback. The committee meets regularly and enables a process of dialogue, connectivity, and empowerment, and that helps to forge change, enable strategies for solution in improving equity in the workplace. And these change strategies really requires a lot of innovative approaches and having a vision to make a change towards a more accessible, inclusive workplace. We also have disability awareness training, for example, by bringing in people with lived experience who have that subject matter expertise that could provide that opportunity for the people that you work with, not only your staff, but your employers, your employees, to help build that growth and understanding into a more diverse, respectful, and involving culture. That training provides opportunities for participants to ask any questions they may have, and it's also a safe space to do so. And that would help them gain a better understanding of a more diverse workplace where people can work collaboratively with one another without any fear of or hesitant to approach people with disability, but more understanding of a fully accessible and an inclusive workplace by incorporating that culture, which makes it more of a holistic approach where people can thrive in that environment.
Thanks, Marco. Maureen, we'll head to you next.
So I just loved Marco's answer so much because culture, what is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So so I think that that's key, right? Changing a culture. But I also just want to add to it and say I think that the main consideration that we have here is that it's not too late to start, and so start somewhere, start small. Get your disability confidence growing, and don't stop. So I think that there's a lot of attention. I think as Philippe had said earlier, with diversity, equity, inclusion, and disability over the last decade or so. And of course now with the ACA, and that's why we're all here together with the Accessible Canada Act, adding in the layer of accessibility can often really seem daunting for businesses and their workers who are not disability confident. But I think that employers and businesses really need to know that they already have the infrastructure to support accessibility forward initiatives. And the legal ramifications, of course, are present, but accessibility focused legislations aren't built or should not be built to scare or strong arm federally regulated entities into doing something that they may not have focused on before. I believe that accessibility standards need to be put in place to guide companies, right? To challenge and inspire them to create those better working environments and quality of life for all of their employees, those with and without disabilities. We make adjustments for workers all the time without disabilities. So making those accommodations and those adjustments in a workplace that is fully accessible is super important. I think it's also really important that we recognize that all organizations and businesses are different. I often say that we have diversity among people with disabilities. Well, we have diversity among businesses as well. And so the way businesses approach accessibility and the type of programs and policies, practices that you adopt to make the workplace more accessible to workers with disabilities will look different than your peers, and that's okay. Some companies may choose to focus, I think that this has already been talked about, on educating their staff and increasing disability appreciation and acceptance. And others might focus on rewriting a policy or developing new approaches to inclusive recruitment. So I think with that, I think, again, at the end of the day, start somewhere. No single company can change corporate culture within a day, right? Take those small steps towards accessibility, grow your confidence, and feed the movement across your organization to really promote long-term change over time.
Thank you, Maureen. I also believe in the value of small steps, and we've certainly seen a number of those small steps in the last decade or so, and I'm excited for more of them in the coming one as well. Philippe, really interested in hearing your perspective here.
Marco, Maureen, thanks so much for your comments on culture, and not too late to start. Certainly, it can be daunting as we stare at our built environment to consider how we might make changes. They are possible, and it is also worth noting 80% of the buildings that exist today will still be in place in 2050. There's a lot more new buildings coming too. We must and can do better. If I were to offer one key thought, building on what's been said, it is the importance of measurement. I am a huge personal fan of Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification. When you measure, forgive me, I'm a professional engineer and I like to measure and put numbers to things. When we can start to see in a scorecard how a building rates, where it's doing well, where there are opportunities for improvement, and where we're doing renovations and otherwise, it helps all of the team, and there are big teams involved, to make better decisions. The second thing, in addition to measuring, I would offer, there's a very important time that happens every, let's say, 5 to 10 years. Your lease might come up for renewal. Talk to your brokers. Ask your brokers to ask about the accessibility merits of a space. Start signaling to the market that this is important. Market pull will prompt supply, and there will be more good spaces coming on if we ask. So educate your brokers, and I commit to do that too. Wonderful.
Such good insights there. I think this next question is perfect for you, Maureen and Marcia. And we'll start with Maureen here, but the question is, what are some accessibility and inclusion practices that are not often considered? Maureen, you're up.
It's such a good question, right? So, because I think that what is not considered is the yes by default mentality. So many times workers with disabilities, especially invisible disabilities or invisible disabilities that are not visible, choose not to disclose their disability at work. So, and that could be for a lot of reasons, some of which we've heard already today and that we continue to hear: fear of discrimination, facing unfair or biased treatment, stereotyping by peers. And the majority of these reasons really stem from the historical and prevailing belief that diversity or differences is a fault, right, or a weakness. And while this narrative has been challenged with the emerging disability, really the diversity and inclusion focused culture in modern workplaces, a lot of employers' practices are quicker to accept diversification and others are not, right? So for instance, accommodation policies and practices have remained medicalized for far too many years. Asking a worker to prove their disability, you have to, if I want to have time off to go and watch my son play soccer, it's a quick question and it's an answer. If I want to have an adjustment made to my workplace, it's paperwork and it's litigious and it's medicalized, as opposed to really just normalizing what it is that we're doing within our workplaces. So that shows the workers, like, I'll treat you fairly only if I have to. And that engenders a culture of mistrust, where workers fear being singled out or pinned as different. So I think that employers really need to recognize the power imbalances that exist within their workplaces, their decision-making, word choices, standardized practices around critical topics such as accommodation, maybe sending the wrong message to their staff. So the yes by default approach is underpinned by the understanding that when we provide all workers with what they need to thrive in the workplace, the businesses thrive. And why would you say no to productivity, right? A higher bottom line, a happier, healthier, and more engaged employee group of employees. So, so I think that that's where we've been missing out over the last little while, I think.
Wonderful. Marcia, what are some accessibility and inclusion practices that are not often considered, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, it has to start from the top. So if the executives of the company are not fully behind being inclusive and accessible, if they, if they'd rather just see things go on as they have been, and not take risks and not hire people that, may have a disability that you've never seen before, you've never dealt with it before. If the people up above are not buying in, it's not going to happen, because then the people down below, the hiring managers, the people who are actually wanting to take these risks, are going to be afraid that those risks are going to affect their own bottom line. Because if they hire someone with a disability and it doesn't quite work as well as they hoped it did or would, then their supervisors / directors, if they're not fully bought into the situation, they're going to take it out on that hiring manager. So it needs to start at the top. And I've seen it where a company was really gung-ho, and then all of a sudden, when the people at the top changed, then the whole attitude changed. And it can really have detrimental effects if you're fighting, if you're someone at the bottom trying to make a difference, but the people above you don't really care.
Thank you so much. That's such a great answer. I want to actually loop back here. We are in a time where we are talking about employee experience right now amid hybrid workplaces. But when I think of my experience, I always think about the barrier-free aspects of my experience in the workplace. And so this is for two of our panelists, Marcia and Philippe. Can you describe a barrier-free workplace experience, and what impact did this have on you? Marcia?
So to me, it was a new office that was built from scratch, basically. And they did everything. They had tiles, so they had different floor textures, so that you could walk down the middle of an aisle using a white cane and not run into things. You'd run into people every once in a while, but the things were at least out of the way. They had tiles around a central dais where there was a control desk, so that you could walk around without running into that. They had an elevator, because there was a set of stairs that led up to the second floor where this office was. They had accessible washrooms. They had all of that. And they also had the attitude that we're going to let everybody be productive, and we're going to encourage productivity everywhere. And so not only was it a physically accessible workplace, but it was an environmentally accessible, the whole shooting match. You came to work wanting to be there because everybody wanted to be there. And you came to work knowing that your supervisor wanted you to be there and understood your productivity and encouraged your productivity. And yeah, to me, that was an accessible workplace. It didn't last forever, but for a few years, it was terrific.
Thank you, Marcia. Philippe, over to you.
Joel, thank you. I will offer three more physical accessibility related ideas. The first is actually an RBC example, where I believe with recycling, it's quite common, as many of you may know, I have quite a sustainability interest and bent in my responsibility for recycling. Instead of labeling bins so that they can only be seen from the top, if we're at different heights, labeling what should go where on the fronts, on the vertical face, can be quite helpful. Another example in West End Toronto, it was the first instance where I really observed in a new construction project a purposeful universal washroom. And when I saw that, I'm as an ally, I smiled. It was really nice. It was a clearly universal, great washroom with very good accessibility and other support measures that we need so that anyone can use the washroom. And the last was in New York, in the Bloomberg headquarters, walking in, and this is thank you to Brad McCannell if he's listening, a key friend and an advocate and ally. Hearing loop. I walked up to the front desk and I saw a sign for a hearing loop, and I knew what it meant, and I knew why they were important. And these are some small examples, and they're popping up more and more. We need to do more of this. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. And we're actually on to our final question, and we have many attendees here today who want to be stronger advocates for inclusive workplaces, and certainly our panelists are among these people. And I guess I'll strike my final question here is, how might each attendee better advocate for inclusive workplaces? I'm going to start with Marcia here.
Don't be afraid. You never know who your allies are going to be. So start at the top. If you're in a company and you see a need for something to change, start at the top. Go to the executives and say, hey, I'm a lowly manager, but I see a way that we could be better. And just don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because in the end, you're going to make it better for so many people.
Great. Marco?
Yes, I also echo what Marcia mentioned. The leadership of the future needs to adopt a more collaborative approach on all spectrums of not only with people with disability, but marginalized groups, and developing policies, decision making, and implementing an accessible and inclusive workplace. So you want to lead by example and be respectful of one another. It's really important to set that tone for the rest of the organization so they can show best practices. Having the willingness to achieve a fitness strategy also creates a disability confident workplace or fitness practices, and will also improve the public image. So when Marcia and Philippe mentioned about having a barrier-free, and that really creates a more welcoming environment for everyone in a universal design perspective. In terms of advocating for inclusive workplaces, I think what's really important is to talk about inclusive hiring practices. You want to be engaging and sharing job opportunities with outreach organizations, providing accommodations during recruitment practices, providing opportunity for people to work in your organization. You want to engage with key community partners to conduct key investigations that could, what's working, what's not working in your organization, and listen to those recommendations. And Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certifications is a great tool to use from a universal design perspective, as well, to make your venue or workplace much more inclusive and accessible. And that will help create multiple levels of change through core policy practices that are non-discriminatory, that reflect inclusive practices.
Thank you, Marco. Philippe, over to you for this question. How might each attendee better advocate for inclusive workplaces? And I'm actually wondering, we have an attendee who also wants you to elaborate on the design of a universal accessible washroom.
Excellent. To the first question, I've learned through our friend Brad McCannell that I am perhaps known in the community as a TAB, a temporarily able-bodied. I've certainly had experiences where through injury or otherwise, I've been on crutches, I can't move. And certainly our future selves, even if today we are temporarily able-bodied, our future selves will thank us to the extent we can inspire and influence change. We will welcome it as we age and otherwise, that we've created better, more welcoming environments. So what I would encourage all of us to do is seek out and create learning opportunities to inspire and influence and create more awareness. Joel, I am not the expert on universal washroom design. I would really need to defer to perhaps the other experts on the call. The one key thing that I might offer is certainly iconography was completely without gender. It was clear that it was quite simply a washroom. And from what I've learned from Brad over the years, it seems as though grab bars and emergency buttons and access points were all at correct heights and levels, and pipes were insulated under sinks so that there's no risk of getting burned. Paper towels were right by the sink. There were some good things, and I'm probably missing some too.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure some of our other attendees can weigh in here, but I do want to thank all of our panelists today for the great answers to those questions. We're going to head to our Q&A period now. Reminder that you can input your question in the Q&A toggle here in Zoom. We already have a few that have already come in that I'll start posing to our panelists. And I'm going to start with that accessible design of a universal washroom. Now, each of us have different, I have my own needs as a wheelchair user, but are there any panelists here that want to talk about the design of a universal washroom and things that they would consider on their end? Anyone want to take that on? Marcy, we'll start with you here, and then we'll head to Marco right after.
So as a blind person, every time I go to a public washroom, it's a crapshoot. Sorry for the unintended pun. But when you can't see, you go feeling for things. So it would be really nice if you didn't have to do that. If there were, say, a QR code on the bathroom door that you could put your phone on, and it would read you a description of where things are, so that if you're standing at the sink, you would know where the soap dispensers were, or where the paper towel dispensers were, or where the garbage cans can hide. I really think they can. There have been lots of times where I've just not found them. Braille signage is great, but again, you have to grope to find it. So some kind of audio cue before you go wandering through the washroom would be great. Yeah, I always find I go looking for things when I should have looked before. So I'll turn on the water and then I'll look for the soap dispenser, which, I mean, it just, I don't know. It's one of those things that people, I don't think people think about it.
I agree, Marcy. And Marco, I think you had something to say here as well around accessible bathrooms.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with, from a universal design perspective. With the Vancouver Airport, we have external disability consultants, including Brad McCannell and others. And what's really key is, from a universal design perspective, you have to think about, door openers, so having access to opening a door by pushing a button, as well as with the universal design washroom. And at the YVR Airport, we have adult changing bench, so people can use that space, as well as a reachable power dispensers. Even the flooring, the contrast changes when coming from the the public space into the washroom. So you get that opportunity to see the difference with tactile signage. One of the new things that we have at our airport that's coming soon is the changing place washroom that has an overhead hoist to lift onto the height adjustable changing bench so that people don't have to change on the floor and know that dignity is not there. So it's really, really a game changer, and will be a game changer for more of an inclusive, universal design for everybody to use our space.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question. I will say, just on a personal note, accessible bathrooms are the first thing that I would personally ask for during the onboarding process when joining a new company. First thing that comes to mind on my end as someone who does use a wheelchair. We're going to move from universal washrooms to the outside environment, and we have an attendee question here. What about the outside built environment? For example, sidewalk sidewalkscapes, sidewalk patios, clutter from e-scooters. How do we manage this sort of fluid environment? This is an important factor in the ability to get to work component. Anyone want to comment on sort of the outside environment, the getting to work, which is often not considered? We have, hold on, I'm trying to look for who. Oh, Maureen.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think that this is it's quite a key question, because we have to look at people, we have to look at workers as full workers, right? Like people who come to work, employees, workers who they have to get to work. So we have to look at transportation issues. We have to look at appropriate physical sight lines and wayfinding mechanisms, as well as proper lighting. But I think that the biggest thing, and this is what we see, especially in rural Canada, is actually physically moving from your home where you're living to a work environment. That's why working from home has become very, very attractive for some people with disabilities. I don't think for all, but I think that we definitely need to continue to focus on the full experience of employment.
Thank you. I'm gonna get to the unless anyone else wants to interject here on the built environment outside of work. But the next question is a really good one as well. And is there a list of preferred vendors who offer software technology to accommodate disability requirements for employees? For example, is Zoom more preferred than Teams for closed captioning services? Anyone want to take that on? It's a very interesting question. Maureen, and Marcia after.
Just really quickly, disability is so diverse that it depends, right? And I hate to say it like that, but it really does depend. I think that it's really important that you ask the user. So if you're having a Zoom meeting with somebody who is deaf and uses a ASL interpreter, they may prefer to use Zoom because the interpreter can be pinned. Whereas if it's a chat feature, or if it's a group work together, somebody with a disability who needs to make sure that they're able to connect individually with different people on the call, that might be Teams. So I think it's super critical to ask the person.
Marcia?
And then there's Google Meet, which I've been told is the best for live captioning, live on the fly transcripts. I think any software can be accessible to certain people. So like Maureen says, you got to ask. I've been told Teams is accessible. You just need to learn what to do with it. Frankly, Teams and I don't get along unless I use it on my iPhone. Then it works fine. So sometimes it's just knowing what version of the software or what device will work the best. So the more you know, the more you can help someone who is new to the technology game, so that The idea is to learn what's out there and learn what works, and then be able to assist. And we always found when I was working full time that as soon as we got the technicians up to speed on our stuff, they left. So it was always, you were always training someone new. But that's just the way things go.
And just to add on about the version of the software, that's true, because many companies are actually in many cases using a version of, could be Office, could be Zoom, that are not up to speed compared to the consumer version of that same digital product. So something to keep in mind. Marco, very quickly, maybe you could just add on here and then we'll quickly get to the next question.
Yeah, and I just wanted to just mention it, and echoing Maureen in terms of the user, it really depends on the user accessing the technology. For example, in my previous workplace where dealing with deaf-blind community, that's really a challenging platform to use virtually, because they need to have what we call an intervener to be beside them to help transcribe and communicate through Zoom technology or any virtual technology. But the live transcript has come a long ways in terms of real-time captioning and so forth. And that's really helped benefit myself as a hard of hearing person in a very inclusive work environment on many virtual calls. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. We'll get right to our next question. I really love this one. For a young startup, how can we be inclusive from the start, the theme of National Accessibility Week this year? Any key areas we should focus on? And just, by the way, thinking of one startup that comes to mind right here in Canada, Fable, being a big one that's secured some nice funding as of late. So anyone want to take on this? How can a young startup be inclusive from the start? Maureen, you're up. And then Marco right after.
So really quickly, I would just say, state your intentions right up front. State your intentions that you are going to be a disability confident employer, that you accommodate your workers, that this is your intention. State it right up front, and believe it. And because if you do it right up front, then everything else just falls into play, right? Then you don't have to worry about absenteeism or people going, hey, how come that person's not at work today? And all that rumor mill that happens around accommodations, especially when it's either work from home or if it's modified duties, because anybody who comes to your new startup knows that you are a disability confident employer, that you accommodate your staff, and so therefore you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of the details.
Marco, I think, and then I think we see Philippe here as well.
Yeah, I'll keep mine short. Just wanted to, if you were to start off, it's really good to reach out to other communities, members, to reach out to government. In British Columbia, we have the Work BC program where you can reach out to, and they can provide the tools, the business planning, the access to funding for accommodations, funding to various different things. So I think that's another opportunity for someone who, if they wanted to do that type of startup.
Thank you, Philippe.
Joel, I love firstly that this question is asked, thanks to the team that raised it. I would encourage, again, two things to reiterate earlier points. One, when and as you grow and you're seeking space, make sure that whomever is representing you to find space knows that this is important to you, so they can start signaling more market pull. We need more really well thought out design spaces. So the more we can put words into the community to signal to owners and managers, this is important. Good. So that's one. And then second thing, get a little bit familiar with Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification. It might tie into your location selection, access egress for site, the way you even fit out your space. But the earlier you start to learn about the different attributes that go well beyond code, the better set up you're going to be as you grow to creating that desirable workplace for everybody that you've mentioned. Thank you.
And Philippe, I'm actually fast tracking here to a question that comes around later. But could you share a little bit about what you saw in the Bloomberg office that made it very inclusive in your mind?
Quite simply, as I approached the front desk on, I think, 525 Broadway or whatnot in Manhattan, was a clear sign that there is a hearing loop here. Right at reception, there was a hearing loop. I read the sign. So if I had a hearing aid, I would immediately know, and depending on, Marco, you would know this better than I, but our hearing aid will automatically switch over. So that was the signal to me, Joel, as I saw a sign written that said hearing loop. And I know they're very important now. So.
Thank you. And I want to get to our next question, and we only have a few minutes, so please, if you can, keep your answers short. But we just talked about the certification program offered by Rick Hansen Foundation, and this attendee wants to know where to find resources to help establish best practices. In my experience, there is a willingness to change, but no background on policy and legal implications. It would be great to have templates or something similar of successful policies that we can use as a launching point. This is especially critical if approaching executive leadership. Anyone want to chime in here? I see your hand raised again there, Philippe. Do you have anything to say on resources? And then we'll get to Maureen, and then we have maybe just time for two more questions after this.
Apologies, I need to learn to take down my hand, Joel.
Oh, sorry.
But that is fine.
We'll
very quickly, there is a registry, to my knowledge, of all accredited professionals who can administer the site visit. What I would certainly encourage is lean on some available funding. It really doesn't cost that much to assess your building or your space, and you learn so much by having it walk through. So take a look at who's qualified and just do an assessment. You will learn so much through that process. Joel?
And I'm going to actually get right to our next question here. This is a really good one. What are the top few physical things that an employer should include in building renovations to support hybrid work in an accessible and inclusive way? I think this is a big one. I can say that I'm one of these hybrid workers. I think hybrid does offer a huge alternative for people with physical disabilities like myself to have that flexibility. But back to the physical, anyone want to answer some of the facets that or considerations that might need to be made in building renovations? Anyone want to take that on? Philippe.
As I understand it, if the washrooms aren't set up and won't work, nothing else really matters. So that's got to be a top priority among others. But I think from a renovation standpoint, ensuring you have an accessible, truly accessible washroom is critical.
This question hits pretty home, and I'm actually going to I'm going to cut it off here, unfortunately, just due to timing. But what are some examples of accommodations that can be made during the recruitment process for non-visible challenges that a candidate may not want to disclose? So really getting into disclosure, but making sure that the place feels that it would be inclusive. Maureen, we're gonna get to you here.
So I think that right off the bat, it's doing an inventory, doing a little bit of reflection on your hiring practices, because it's one thing to put up a sign that says that we are disability confident, or that we employ people of all backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't really, then don't put up the sign. So I think that it starts even further back to do a bit of an audit to figure out what areas of your workplace would be barriers to people with disabilities. And then talking about, even on that job posting, that you are an inclusive employer, and that you will and so ask if there are any accommodations that need to be made during an interview. Making those statements right up front are very, very important. And I just want to get back to the resources question really quickly, and that is have a look at the President's Group in BC. They've got some amazing resources on templates and other best practices. CCRW, we've got we're just in the in the throes, and Marcia is helping us with creating a disability confident employer toolkit that will be live on our website later on this year, and that will have little toolkits to be able to make sure that you're accessible as an employer, including those types of templates. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, Maureen. And there is one question that I'm just going to quickly answer just based on my thoughts here. It's how do you could you address consideration for that workplaces should have for time variances for different tasks that impact not only work tasks, but eating, bathroom breaks, meetings, when accommodating employees with varying disabilities? Are there other non-physical considerations that a workplace should be aware of that are not obvious? The not obvious things are actually the social factors, in my view. Part of being at the office and being at work is, to me, hanging out with your colleagues, getting to network. And if you're choosing a location to meet after work that might not have an accessible bathroom, you're definitely leaving that. In terms of time controls, I personally think that's a very outdated mindset, especially as it relates to all types of work. I know there's certain time factors, whether you're in an advice center, phone channel, but adaptability. Make sure that you have that. Whether that employee might need extra bathroom breaks, extra time. All of that should be factored into the entire workplace accommodation process at the start, which is why I believe disclosure is personally the best way to go about it at this current environment. But I would like to just let everyone know that this was a fantastic discussion. I don't know about you, but I've personally learned so much from all of our panelists. Just to break things down, I wrote a few notes down here, but some of the big points that I want to reiterate here is consult with community members, subject matter experts, have a consultation practice that's led by PWDs. So important to learn and really get out there and network with people that are part of our community. I think all of us here are advocates, and we're here for you to lean on if you do have questions. And the other thing is, it's not too late to start small. The power of small steps. We talked about that. Grow your disability confidence and don't stop. Attending sessions like today are part of that. Next, being inclusive is about giving people what they need to be successful. One method does not fit all. So true. Not every disability is the same, even among wheelchair users like myself, people who have physical disabilities. And the last point is the leadership of the future needs to adopt a more collaborative approach. We need more leaders to step it up. We need people to be vocal about their support around inclusive workplaces. And there's no better time than now during National Accessibility Week. So I'd like to thank Marcia, Marco, Maureen, Philippe for bringing so much into the conversation today around the power of inclusive workplaces. Thank you again to the Rick Hansen Foundation for bringing us all together to discuss this important topic in honor of National Accessibility Week. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope you gained some valuable takeaways and encourage you to incorporate them into your work and personal lives. We've started an important conversation today, and we look forward to continuing it with you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.